I hope you're not getting bored with seeing me. I'm really sorry about this. But unfortunately, two of our wonderful friends got COVID, so there would have been someone else. But anyway, I'll pretend. Anyway, these are the important people. Look, I've got some really interesting people here representing 3 cities which are really, I don't know what to call them. They're obviously pioneer cities. They've achieved so much. The application that they did was about one dimension of what they're doing and have done. But let's just remember, there's a hell of a lot of stuff behind all of them. Now, we've got, beginning with the alphabetic order, Curitiba, Liana over there, Tiffany, Melbourne, as someone said, Melbourne, which I think is a lovely way of saying Melbourne, and then Ina here from Vienna. Now, you know the format already. We just asked people to describe a bit what their city's about and what they're doing. So let me start off with you, Liana.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm very glad to be here. A bit nervous. We have been discussing this. Some water with sugar we need. But anyway, the city of Curitiba has a recognition because of the master plan that started at the end of the 60s. The city was growing very fast. The population was growing at 6% per year. So the city needed a new master plan to organize this development. And there was a competition for the new master plan, and the master plan that was selected had some recommendations. One was the creation of an institution responsible for urban planning that the city didn't have at the time, and it's where I work now. The second recommendation is having the human being as the center of all the planning, giving priority to the pedestrians. So it's why the first pedestrian street of Brazil was implemented in Curitiba in 1972. The other priority was to the bus, to mass transport. So trying not to incentivize the use of the private cars. But this is not just a way of a project of a simple bus, but it was a system putting together, integrating land use, street network, and the bus, the transport system. And in fact, corridors had been built with high density, mixed uses, and in the central street of these corridors, we have dedicated lanes for the buses. This is how started the integrated system, transport system, and that after some years was known, it is known as the BRT, the Bus Rapid Transit, that has been also implemented in several other cities in the world. So this was the beginning of the revolution of the urban planning in Curitiba, changing the ways, the figures, the format of the city. A city that, in fact, until the 60s and 70s was a dull city. And now I think it's an interesting city. So the master plan also proposed a general vision, a more large vision, integrating to the physical transformation also the social and economic development and the preservation of the environment. We have been preserving the environment, not only the green areas, but as well implementing parks with artificial lakes along the rivers. So trying to avoid or preparing the city to avoid floodings. Recently, this kind of solution came up as being the sponge city. We started with this kind of solutions in the early 70s. So it's helping a lot now because of the climate change, that we have this concentration of huge rains. The parks with these artificial lakes are a kind of solution. What's interesting that also the parks have the function of drainage, have this function of preserving the green areas, offering leisure, and also are part of our culture. The population of Curitiba is formed by several different cultural groups, ethnic groups. At the beginning, some indigenous. We have very few nowadays, but then around the 1850s, started to arrive the Polish, the Germans, the Italian, after them the French, Ukrainian, Japanese, the Arab people. So the population of Curitiba is a kind of mixture of all different groups. And almost all the parks have been dedicated to these different ethnic groups in respect to the different culture. So it's a way of inclusion, not only if it's high or low rent, but also because of the culture. The new plans and projects still follow the same guidelines proposed at the end of the 60s, of course, updated, including innovation, including the society and the participation of the people. So we are always looking ahead, try to look ahead and bring to the city new solutions, the innovation. We just inaugurated at the Institute for Research and Urban Planning in Curitiba a sector that we call urban hypervisor. That's we collect all the data that we already have, but together we are inviting other secretariats of the local government, the state government, private companies like Waze or the telephone companies to share with us the data so that we can use it for a better planning, have more instruments for a better planning, and try to give more quality of life to the people.
Great, thank you. We'll immediately move on to Tiffany Jane, as I've just discovered.
Thanks, Giles. So Melbourne, and it's interesting to talk about our transformation journey over really the last 40 years, and it's such a long time to be referencing. And I'd like to acknowledge actually that in talking about that work, I'm really discussing the work of colleagues and many brilliant people who I have learnt from and who have come before me, including the great Professor Rob Adams, who really was the original visionary of what I'm speaking about today and who I've learnt an awful lot from. But in the 1980s, Melbourne was very much losing its soul, if you like. We are a city, for those who haven't visited us, that was built during its post-colonial age on the gold rush. And there was a lot of wealth at that time, beautiful buildings, European gardens and street teas. But in the 1980s, we really found that come the evening and the weekend, the city was deserted. And we were kind of caught in a deadlock between residents seeking a different life on the outskirts of Melbourne, the dream of the quarter-acre block and a big home, very much car-driven population. And the retail sector was struggling. We found that theatres were closing, and all of these beautiful old buildings were starting to be demolished, and that identity was being lost. And so really the vision was about how do we turn ourselves from a central business district into a central activity centre. And I can say that transformation was very much about bringing people through postcode 3000, as it was called at the time, to bring people back into living in the city and to challenging this notion of the quarter-acre block and a big garden and a separate home and always commuting by car. We've gone from 630 residences in that early 80s time to 64,000 now. And that's a massive transformation, and that has involved using all those beautiful old buildings and turning them into apartments. And the city now is very vibrant. We may not have the sexy icons of Sydney, but Melbourne is much greater than Sydney. We don't have, the harbour, we don't have the Opera House, but what we have is in essence, a culture that you can discover by visiting the city and through its laneways, amazing food, very multicultural. But also what has really underlined a lot of the work is what I guess you could look back and say a lot of identity of the Sustainable Development Goals is, it was about resilience. It was about revitalising our parks and gardens, which actually during the millennium period, the 2000s, we were losing because of the drought, which then led to an urban forest strategy. It was a world first, the world first urban forest strategy. And this is because all our parks and gardens were turning dry and shrivelling up. There was no water. And we realised that we'd taken water as an asset for granted. And now we plant over 3,000 trees a year. One of my roles is as Chief Heat Officer, so my responsibility is to try and cool the city. And in order to do that, we need to call on nature. We need to call on water. So the urban forest strategy is very much part of achieving that goal and reducing the temperature of the city. Even though we're quite a cool, temperate climate, in fact, more people die in Melbourne than any other city in Australia, which people find surprising, and that's because we have really intense heat waves. So calling on urban forestry, diversifying our street trees, really planting biodiverse parks and gardens, focusing on the understory and not just street trees has been very important in terms of talking about our urban nature, and there's so much of it to celebrate. One of the images in front of you is the most recent project that we've launched called Power Melbourne. That is, you're probably wondering what they are. They are a series of integrated grid-connected batteries. And again, it's another world first. And I say that not to say that we're the best, but we want to learn from these projects and we want to replicate them, and we share all of our intellectual property, and that is recognising that we are in a climate crisis and that we need to share our learnings and learn from one another. These are grid-connected batteries. We will have 3 of the projects around, and we're working with the private sector on this project. Melbourne is proudly seeking to be 100% renewable by 2030. That's really difficult in Melbourne because we are so reliant on dirty brown coal. And there's been a long politics journey in Australia, which you've probably followed. So we've just taken our own path and been rapidly decarbonising the city, and we have a goal to be 100% zero emissions city, by 2040. And we're on track to do that through projects like the Melbourne Renewable Energy Project, which is the last I'll speak about. And that is a project, again, we've shared all our intellectual property, where we brought together 13 of the largest power users in the city through our power purchase agreement. And we were able to procure enough energy to build a wind farm, and the City of Melbourne did all of the contracting, and we've reduced the emissions by 5% of the city, and that project has now been replicated around the world. and in fact been delivered in a much better way than we did it the first time. So there's just so many different initiatives I could speak about, Charles. But there's certainly been a transformation.
Well, that gives us a bit of an overview of some really interesting things. Ina, let's go over to Vienna.
Thank you. I know it's already the third time Vienna. I hope I'm not bothering too much.
No, we're very interested.
I can assure you it's not a Vienna campaign. However, of course, I'm very happy, as I'm a typical Viennese, that we are talking so much about our fantastic city. And I'm hoping that you all come to visit sooner or later, maybe already next year at the Mayor's Forum, some of us advertisement. Okay. I take the occasion. We already saw many good practices of urban transformation projects. We have heard about some of them, but especially our speaker before lunch, Maria Vasilako, demonstrated some, which several have been in Vienna. So what I want to demonstrate you is what makes these examples, these activities in the city, in the public space in Vienna possible, and how can we, with our smart city strategy, boost these projects to make them better, to be faster, how it is needed, and to involve the people, the citizens of Vienna. So let's go some steps behind. What was our starting point 14, 15 years ago? Climate crisis. Vienna as well was well aware of that. And we thought, okay, we need to do something. We need realistic goals, but ambitious goals. But we don't want silo goals, because we will not solve the climate crisis if we have just implement or solve or have solutions in the energy sector, construction sector. We need now more. We need clusters of activities. So what we did is we found out that we need an umbrella strategy, a strategy which embraces everything and tries or forces to work together. Not only the city departments, but as well the industry outside and whoever is involved to make a good transformation of a city. So we thought, okay, we are smart. We need a smart city strategy. It's maybe a little bit misleading. Let me assure you, it's not a digital strategy. It's not a technological-oriented strategy. Smart, in our definition, is clever. We want to be clever. We want to solve it clever. And so it's not... it's about innovation, it's about technological innovation, but as well about social innovation. So the next smart thing, clever thing we did is we thought, okay, there are sustainable development goals. We could make our own strategy. We are not doing this. We are including the SDGs in our smart climate city strategy. So what we manage is with our 74 goals in 11 different areas, we as well managed to address all 17 SDGs. This was a surprise for me. So important for us is people are at the focus. It's not the technology. The strategy is living and developing. This is maybe another good example is the first strategy we adopted 2014. And since this time, Vienna has increased by 300,000 people. It's quite a lot. It's a whole city. The second largest city in Vienna, we have 2 million, Vienna. The second largest city is Graz, which has exactly 300,000 people. So we have to manage to include the whole city in the city of Vienna, which means education, workspace, and so on, social, green infrastructure, transport, housing, of course, affordable housing. So these are a part of the climate crisis, the challenges we are facing. As I said, the strategy is living and developing, which means we set goals, we adopt them by the city council, we reflect, we monitor, we change them, we make them more ambitious, and we need to change the focus partly. our focus at the moment are the 3 Cs, in German the 3 Ks. It's climate adaptation, climate protection, and circular economy. Makes sense somehow. What we do is, as I said, we don't work on silo goals, which means, especially in climate adaptation, of course, more trees and shade and water in the streets and so on. But we try to not open the streets. We do it when it's necessary, which means, and here we come to the climate protection. We need to change the energy system, of course, so meaning alternative energy systems, district heating and so on. So when we have construction work doing there, we of course try to do the maximum in climate adaptation. Meaning at the moment we have several underground stations to come, big construction sites. So we have the possibility to be very efficient there, of course, to save a lot of money and to sort of as well, what Maria already said, was this important for us to make the people participate. What do they want there as well? The fears they have, yeah, like ground floors, empty spaces. So we think about meanwhile uses, temporary uses, and take the people on board, bottom up. So the last one is circular economy. I want to focus on is here you see, we already saw the picture before, Seestadt Aspern, our big urban development site. It's enormous and it's developing and being constructed in several steps, so we can learn. When we have finished one, we look what's going well, what not. We try to learn for the next areas, which is quite interesting and was quite new for us. What I want to, what for me was really amazing and an absolutely best practice, I think normally a good practices, is the construction movements we had there. We had no movements. The whole material stayed there. You see here it's an artificial lake, so the material we took out as well for the houses, for the buildings, was reused on the site. So there was the industry there to make concrete or whatever. So at the end, we saved, I think, about 300,000 for now lorries transportation, and it's enormous. Yeah, I think I should stop now, isn't it?
No, that's great. That's great. We've got a lovely overview of 3 places, and they're all different, but at the same time they show some similarities. And one of them is this whole focus on being human-centered in some sense, which might be called participation or something like that. Then this other thing I'm really hearing, and Mark Farrow earlier said one of his P's was patience. Essentially, it takes a hell of a long time. All of this is not just happening in the blip of an eyelid. And thirdly, what becomes completely clear is that you're breaking down silos, you're thinking in an integrated way, you talked about circularity. And then fourthly, some of the things, the words I'm hearing or that are coming into my mind as you all spoke was determination, focus, foresight, being bold, whatever, ambition. I'm obsessed by ambition. But all of that was somewhere in the mix. So just jumping over to Liana, one of the things I find so interesting, I mean, a lot of Curitiba's reputation stemmed initially from Jaime Lerner's 3 times being mayor and then the governor of Paraná state. And one of the things I find so interesting, because we use the word innovation so easily and lightly, actually he was always incredibly creative because he did one thing that did 3 things at the same time. Like when you talked about the riverbed, it was then also leisure, it was also inclusion, it was also that. Or he flipped round, waste is a resource, he already said 40 years ago, and I think you still pay people who bring waste, you give them vegetables. I mean, that exchange. Or there was also one other example, I think, the fishermen, when they bought rubbish from the sea, they got money for the weight of the... So there was a series of innovative things. So in that sense, do you still think it's so difficult? This is my question. Sorry, that was a long introduction. My question is... are you still being able to push the boundary to think ahead? Do you think you still are able to do that?
I think we are committed with this kind of pushing and a way of working, looking at the other experiences, taking inspiration from other experiences in other cities, and adapting to our city, to our reality. And for example, now we are very taking care of the food security, so we created an urban farm that is what for growing vegetables in organic way. It was inaugurated exactly during the pandemic in 2020, so all the produce was being used for low-income families that lost jobs and were in difficult. And for example, we contracted chefs, cuisine chefs, to teach the people, doesn't matter who, how to use everything, since the root to the leaves. It's very interesting, this kind of seeing food and the city very taking care of the people with food. We are now, because of the climate change, we have a master plan for climate, what we have to do. There are at least 20 actions, which is the problem. We have to attack the emissions, most of them created by vehicles. So the fleet of the buses started to change to electricity mode. We have to improve the separation of garbage. We already recycle 20% of the garbage, but 80% go to the landfill. 20% is very high, according to other cities in Brazil and in Latin America. But we want to invert this.
Invert that to 80-20.
Yes.
Well, that's ambitious.
Yes, this is ambitious, so we are working on this. And the other thing is changing the energy, the production of energy, consumption of energy in the buildings. This we have to start. But we already have solar panels, even in the new affordable houses. We already started with the panels in affordable houses. And we have panels covering the old landfill. We cover all the landfill that is closed with panels. The roofs of the city hall, bus terminals, and with this action, we cover the demand of 60% of electricity of the public buildings in Curitiba. So we are doing, not just planning.
You're not resting on your laurels of the achievements of the past, having been a pioneer. Tiffany, what struck me, I remember the first time I went to Melbourne, it was one place, and now it's such a different place. But I remember some of the things Melbourne's done has been really slightly crazily bold. I remember David Yankin, your head of plan of Victoria, allowed an artist on the main street, was called Jim Lundy, I think, to take the main street, which is a horrible street, called Swanston Street, and then overnight to grass it. And so it prefigured a future. And what I think is rather good about many of the other things you've done subsequently is precisely that sort of attitude, which you might say is a bit wacky. But do you agree with that? Because that's where I think your courage comes from.
Yes, I do agree, although it's not always the biggest and the boldest ambitious actions that resonate and that have taken hold. In fact, upon reflection, some of the smaller, more incremental actions that have been the most long-standing. But yes, Australians are known for big, bold, crazy activity, and some really exciting art scenes, particularly in Melbourne. But when I think about the transformation of Melbourne and taking back a lot of the public space for nature, for example, that has been incremental. Over time, slowly taking more and more road space and planting that and opening that area up for street trees or for cycleways, for permeable paving and for pedestrians. That has taken time, and a lot of the time that comes through challenge. It could be through funding challenges, it can be through governance challenges, just politics and the nature of politics and the 4-year terms that we have to deal with. So taking what you can but holding on to that longer term vision has been really important in order to achieve what we've been able to achieve.
Yeah, and some of the things, might again sound quite simple. I'm just thinking of the laneways, which everybody now tries to copy, to sort of is actually incredibly innovative, because you often think, I'm going to regenerate the city from the front face. But you sort of also did it from the side streets in a way, which sort of made things bubble up, didn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, and people have been copying that all around the world, and it is inspirational.
Sorry, the laneways really are magical, much better than what you've just referred to, say Swanston Street and our main thoroughfares, where you have the trams and they're very busy, all of the usual shops and industry, but the laneways are filled with activity and magic, and those that aren't filled with activity, we have been very deliberate about intervening in those with unexpected art. So we've commissioned over time various artists to perhaps use street art or to use sculptures and to really reimagine what those laneways can be for the public in order to create a sense of wonder and magic and discovery. And I think that's been really special, not just for visitors to Melbourne, but also for people that live and work in the city. Through COVID, we've had to really reinvent the city again and to learn post-COVID from the lessons of the past and work even harder at what is the city's identity. How do we continue to draw workers back to the city so that they're not working at home? And an art has been a big part of that, but also nature. So,
because I think you certainly, you seem to have softened the city, if I can call it that. I mean, the nature has made it less harsh, hasn't it?
Well, even in our laneways, we've been very deliberate about greening those. So again, taking back, those hard paved surfaces and ripping up where we can to make way for nature. Or working with the private sector or perhaps residents to give them small grants or other funding or to encourage them or to give them even information about how to grow nature in a city context.
I mean, what that reminds me of is 100 small things done well is the equivalent of a big wow effect in a way, which is really great. Coming to you, Ina, I have to mention that Aspen. I was once in that place and I was walking around and then it suddenly said Janis Joplin Street, Hannah Arendt Street. Every sort of famous woman you've ever heard of. And I thought, hey, what's going on here? And I thought that you could call that a small action or you could call that a giant action. But it changes, I do think, it changes your perception of a place. Because I think you've done a survey where 5,000 names were guys' names and about 300 women's names. And I think that is another example of a symbolic act, a small thing that is massive. I don't know whether you think that's true.
That's my specialization, but I can say that generally we already had the gendered city today, the project. And we look very carefully to the city names and square names in Vienna, and we reflect and partly rename them to female important people. And of course, I mean, part of this Janis Joplin for me is my childhood somehow. I mean, not really, but I'm not that old, but I liked her a lot, and of course there's a lot we can tell our children or people living there. It's a lot of culture. Of course, we use name from musicians, theater, authors, and so on. So as we have quarter management in these new built areas, I'm sure that this is a topic as well.
So Vienna is associated, for us in Europe at least, as sort of the place where social housing and all of that and affordability is possible. Are there any challenges to that? Because so many people are saying, Christ almighty, we can't, you know, in London, if you're young, you can't live, you can't afford anything. Whereas, I mean, is Vienna still strong enough to resist forces that might be trying to get you to sell properties or anything?
We are not selling.
No, I'm just asking. That's the question. I mean, the audience wants to know that you're not selling. I hope they want to know. Yeah.
I have a very good example. We never sold our energy company. Other cities in Europe did, and they're trying to buy it back now. And I think this is a very important topic, because like this we can provide our citizens a certain security. A part of this social housing, of course, is a big topic in Vienna, always was, a big tradition. We are sort of boosting it again. And of course, it's not only difficult, we discussed this already a lot, we try to get a healthier mixture in the social houses, which means that we have certain activities now for young people, like students, which get easier access to social houses, so we can get, as I said, a healthy mix of different
young and
people,
old and all
different nationalities, different income. But generally, we are constructing again since 2019 social houses all over Vienna, and they are, let's say, they contribute to climate protection, to climate adaptation, and to the circular economy. We are taking care of this.
Great. Liana, we'll have one more round. Snappy answers, given the time and stuff like that. What are your, beyond climate, and all of us are talking about climate, what are the big, name me one or two big, I mean, Michael Coe asked that question, you know, what makes you have a sleepless night? But what are the big things that you think, oh my God, we've got to deal with this, apart from the climate issue? Is there anything, I don't know, integration or whatever?
Well, I think the great issue is something about the climate change. We are progressing and having a plan, and of course it depends on budget, implementation, the change of energy for the transport. This is a very huge issue. But now we have an aging society. So we are not growing as this, like in the 60s. Now we are growing 0.1% per year. So it's a huge increase of aging older people. So you have to adapt now the equipments, the solutions, but mainly I think the most important is housing, affordable housing.
Right.
We have to tackle these.
That has been a bit of the issue.
Yes, and we are in fact developing studies. We used to sell the houses, affordable houses, and now we realize that the renting houses should be a better solution because you have renovation, possibility of renovation, updating the buildings, updating old houses, affordable houses. If you give to you sell to the low-income people, how they can change the energy that's used there.
Great. What is a big
I
thing?
can't separate climate from my answer. It's
No
my
worries.
role. Because I think that climate is at the centre of everything that we're doing now. It has to be in cities. But that said, I think a lot, and the thing that keeps me awake a lot, and I can't solve it on my own, and we all need to think about it, is the fragmentation of governance and the misunderstanding of the role of city, of the power of cities. I think we all need to do a better job at selling the role of cities and how important we are to the lives of people. There's so much focus on national governments. You know, even the Sustainable Development Goals were established for nation states. But cities are the closest level of governance to people. We are the ones that are changing people's lives in the way that we develop cities and the way that we are responding to the climate crisis. So I think a lot about that, and I think if we could do more around the governance of the fragmentation of governance between nations and cities, then we could probably advance our action.
And you mean also effectively more power to cities in a sense?
Power and money.
The money, I mean.
Money to do more on climate. And partnerships. Yeah.
No, that's a great answer. Ina, what is your big issue or something that is, I mean, we've got housing today, we've got interesting new issues on the table. What is your big thing you want to leave us with? Or leave all of our friends here with?
My big thing is what I experienced the last 10, 12 years working on this smart climate city strategy, that we can only do it together. And that this was an enormous experience for us all in the city. We did it by ourselves as well, the monitoring. And it was such a learning effect. I remember my colleagues from other departments, and they realized, oh, I have a part here as well. So, for instance, for the education sector or social inclusion or participation, and generally, I'm.
No. You say. What you're saying is very clear.
No, I lost it.
No. What you're saying is very clear, and I think it's really interesting that it all fits together. That somehow breaking down these boxes and stuff like that, and 1 + 1 could equal 3. I mean, to be rather simplistic about it. Well, it says time's up. Well, it is time up. But actually, you are all 3 fantastic people. Thank you so much. And your cities, of course, are something else. So can we give them Liana, Tiffany, and Ina an applause?